Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining in. I'm your host, Ardina Ferrin, and today we're speaking with Josh Green, founder and CEO of Inspiration Mobility Group and spokesperson for the American Fleet Leadership Coalition. Josh, welcome.
Thanks, Ardina. Nice to be here.
Happy to have you. I'm so grateful to be able to talk because the 45W tax credit is a pretty hot topic right now. A lot of my coworkers have mentioned that it's come up in their own conversations. So I'm excited to be able to shed some light and educate our viewership.
Great. Yeah, it's an important topic for the entire industry, and excited to be able to talk to you about it today.
Thank you. So to start, could you please briefly explain the 45W tax credit and who might benefit?
Sure. 45W is the Commercial Clean Vehicle Tax Credit. It is a federal tax credit for the adoption, to promote the adoption of commercial vehicles. The beneficiaries are really three different groups. One, businesses that purchase or lease a vehicle for commercial use. Second, organizations like nonprofits, municipalities that can also purchase a vehicle, and in that case, the credit is monetized through something called direct pay, where they actually get a check from the Treasury because they're not a taxpayer. And then lastly, 45W today allows for consumers to lease vehicles from businesses and get that tax credit embedded in the lease payment.
Are there qualifications? Who can qualify for this?
Really, any U.S. commercial business, or it has to be, the vehicle has to be titled, registered, used in the United States. But beyond that, there really are no qualifications on the vehicle. There's obviously certain types of vehicles. But 45W in particular is very broad in that it covers both light duty vehicles, medium duty, heavy duty vehicles. It even covers some off-road mobile machinery.
Nice. So what I'm hearing is that, businesses on any scale, including maybe an owner-operator, would qualify for this tax credit.
That's right. And it's worth pointing out that though electric vehicles are the most talked about and biggest beneficiary of 45W, it also applies to other clean fuel vehicles. So you can get a 45W tax credit for plug-in hybrids, for hydrogen vehicles, I think even for CNG, propane vehicles as well.
Wow. So this is available to a lot of different companies as well as vehicle types.
Correct.
And which industries might you see this tax credit impacting most?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. It really impacts any commercial fleet. So as you probably know, and your readers and listeners probably know, commercial fleet vehicles are all around us all the time. Estimates that we've seen are that there are roughly 40 million commercial vehicles on the roads of the United States today. And so those can be anything from a Class 8 tractor utilized by a logistics player or a drayage company, to trash trucks utilized by waste management companies, to school buses, down to last mile delivery vehicles, box trucks, and then down to SUVs, pickup trucks, hatchbacks used by service companies, sales rep vehicles. It is broadly applicable by its nature. And so every company that has vehicles that they use for business is a potential beneficiary.
And given that this can impact so many businesses on such a broad scale, because it really sounds like it applies to just about anyone and everyone, what would be some misunderstandings or possibly frequent mistakes that businesses should be aware of when trying to access the credit?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that probably the most frequent two things that we hear and have to talk to companies about are, one, unlike some of the other, I would say, both clean energy and EV tax credits that are out there, 45W is not transferable, meaning the original owner the original title holder of the vehicle is the recipient of the credit, and that credit cannot be sold, monetized by somebody else. It's only the title holder of the vehicle. So it can be the owner, owner operator if they're buying their vehicles, or it can be the lessor, the leasing business that is on the title of the vehicle. So it's not transferable. The other thing, which is a form of transferability, is that it's not eligible for what's known as direct pay, which for 30D, which is the consumer tax credit, if you were to walk into a dealer and purchase an eligible electric vehicle, you would, in many cases, the dealer can actually get that $7,500 in the case of a light duty vehicle directly paid to them. So they will lower the purchase price of the vehicle to you by $7,500 exactly. So you will pay at the time of purchase $7,500 less. Direct pay does not exist for commercial businesses. Again, it does exist for tax exempt organizations, but it does not exist for private companies. And so that credit either is going to be monetized as an actual credit when you file your tax returns or you pay your estimated taxes, or it is going to be monetized by a company like Inspiration Mobility Group in the form of a subsidized interest rate on a commercial lease. But it's not a transferable credit, and it is not $7,500 off the hood, which is often the perception.
Thank you for the clarification. I think that sheds a lot of light on our business owners who might be interested in this credit and need to know that there are some things to be aware of.
Yep.
Now, the American Fleet Leadership Coalition has done a lot of work because there is a proposed repeal of the 45W. Could you please explain that a little more?
Yeah, absolutely. So the American Fleet Leadership Coalition was launched formally a few weeks ago. We're up to, I think, 17 companies as members, and it's growing by the week still. It's a coalition that encompasses companies that are electrification fleet management companies like ourselves, involved investors in electrification from the charging side, so setting up charging infrastructure. It has vehicle OEMs, vehicle manufacturers in there, as well as some commercial fleets. So it's a broad representation, as well as some fleet industry associations. And we felt there was a need for that coalition to advocate for 45W and explain to Congress how that tax credit is already benefiting commercial businesses in the U.S., helping them lower costs and improve vehicle reliability and availability and driver safety through the adoption of electric vehicles, and how that relates back to Republican majority goals in terms of supporting U.S. businesses, American jobs, the 45X tax credit, which is the clean manufacturing tax credit, which is incenting the production onshore here in the U.S. of both the vehicles and the batteries. And so all of these things were designed as a package. American Fleet Leadership Coalition was formed to educate members of Congress about this tax credit, how it's being used, why it's important. And as you stated, there has been one markup release so far from Ways and Means in the House that today would call for the repeal of the 45W tax credit as of 12/31/25, so at the end of this year. The coalition feels that is both abrupt and harms many of the stated goals of the Republican majority in terms of supporting U.S. workers, U.S. businesses, U.S. competitiveness. So we are actively involved today in discussions with members of the House, with senators, with Senate Finance, Ways and Means, about other solutions that would involve maintaining that credit and maintaining the support it's giving U.S. businesses and educating them on why that's important.
Thank you for you and the work of the coalition, because it's important that businesses and anybody within the automotive or really the economic sector, this affects everybody. And when you think about it, the front line is that it's affecting these businesses, but down the line, it affects the end users of those businesses. So thank you very much for the support and the effort that you're giving towards this. The proposed repeal of 45W is obviously a major concern. What are the immediate consequences for businesses in the EV industry if this happens?
Yeah, well, so businesses in the EV industry in particular, you're asking about?
Yeah, or users of the EV.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, I think, look, businesses plan in advance, right? I mean, businesses and the private sector in general thrive on predictability and consistency. And in a survey done last year of fleet managers in the US, 87% said they intended to increase the number of EVs in their fleet over the coming 5 years. And so companies plan, more than 1 year in advance, more than 6 months in advance, in this case, until the end of the year. And many have planned their fleet rotations to have an increasing share of electric vehicles over time. And I think those decisions, those plans are impacted if all of a sudden 45W is terminated abruptly, and it changes the economic equation of whether and which EVs are so-called in the money, right? Are actually cheaper or at least at parity with an internal combustion engine vehicle on a total cost of ownership TCO basis. So it certainly immediately puts undue strain, I think, on companies that have already made plans. They're seeing results from the adoption of electric vehicles. Their drivers want them. Their customers want them. And now they're having to reevaluate which vehicles are actually able to compete economically because that tax credit that they had planned on being there is suddenly gone. Obviously, it has big impacts on vehicle OEMs, on part suppliers, on battery investments and manufacturing here in the country. If there are still subsidies for manufacturing, clean manufacturing in the US, but the demand for those products, the incentives that were generating some pull demand for those products are all of a sudden curtailed. So, and you've seen that in certain forecasts for EV sales and EV penetrations beginning to go down. There was a recent study actually that said that if 45W and some of the other EV incentives were eliminated entirely, as they are now slated for in at least that House Ways and Means markup, it would lead to a loss of 130,000 direct jobs and 310,000 indirect jobs related to manufacturing of vehicles, manufacturing of the batteries, all the parts. And so I think, there are big impacts on U.S. Economic performance and on jobs and business health that we are, talking about and making sure everybody understands. When you make such an abrupt change, businesses that have made plans under one regime need time to adjust.
And, there has been so much effort, so much, not just money, but time, educational efforts to go into the push for EV, and for that to be just taken away, like you said, abruptly. What is the coalition suggesting as opposed to a full repeal?
Yeah, it's a good question. We are up on the Hill talking about the benefits that 45W and EVs in particular bring to the US in terms of jobs, in terms of economic competitiveness, in terms of national security, because EVs are fueled with domestically produced electricity versus foreign imported oil. We are talking about the entirety of EV supply chains, EV manufacturing, EV adoption in the US, and making that case very strongly for electric vehicles being an industry of the future that the US does not want to cede any further to China and other countries. I think in terms of specifics, we are talking about a range of options. I think the biggest thing that we are pointing out is that this abrupt curtailment has many knock-on effects and in fact is counterproductive to some of the aims, the stated aims of the Republican majority. And as I said, counterproductive to incenting clean manufacturing here, as well as, frankly, counterproductive to all the support both the administration and Congress has given to the autonomous vehicle industry, which is an industry of the future, clearly, and the vast majority of AVs are EVs. And so, we continue to point out that if you're serious about supporting autonomous vehicles, it isn't a very attractive future if only the software is produced here, but we're putting software and sensors on Chinese-made vehicles. So I think the specifics of different ways that this credit can still have the intended effect of supporting U.S. businesses while contributing to the fiscal impacts, the fiscal savings that the Republican majority is looking for, as well as some of the other goals. The specifics, I think, are still being discussed and negotiated. I will say, having this credit sunset earlier than 2031 is something that we would be open to discussion on, but 2025 is way too early. The other common sense change that has been talked about is porting over some of the domestic content requirements that today exist in 30D, which is, again, the consumer EV credit, which don't exist in 45W. So we are making the case that having some sort of domestic content requirements, and as long as they are done in a phasing in manner, so it's not just a cliff, it's something that is going to incent onshoring of production for batteries, vehicles, and gives the industry time to plan and adjust, make a lot of sense to again, strengthen those goals and support those goals of onshoring and domestic manufacturing jobs and competitiveness.
So what I'm hearing a lot, I mean, outside of kind of the wrench that's been thrown into the mix of, now that all of a sudden we're going to see this potentially being repealed, there's still a lot of positive impact. And you've been highlighting how 45W strengthens American businesses and supports this Made in America model. Could you please talk about some of those benefits? And I think they really deserve a highlight because that's something that we as Americans have been working towards, for quite some time.
Yeah, and you're talking about the benefits that businesses and fleets see when they adopt electric vehicles, correct?
Yes, as well as, if we're trying to move our model for the industry itself and whatever we can be producing here in America be produced. I think it's important to highlight how that will positively affect our country and economy.
Yeah, okay. Well, let me start with the latter then first. So as I've talked about, there's a strong consensus that we want to bring jobs back to the U.S., that we want to incent manufacturing in the United States of everything, as many things as possible. And I think there's a growing consensus. I mean, I would say today, if you talk to impartial, apolitical, advisors and groups that do kind of some of these studies in terms of looking at the future and industrial growth and economic competitiveness, I'd say there's widespread agreement that electric vehicles are the future of transportation in the vast majority of cases. I think there is reasonable disagreement on how fast that will happen, but I don't think there's anybody who's seriously saying in 25 years, 30 years, internal combustion engines are widespread and that is the drivetrain of the future. Just the reductions in battery costs and EV costs that we have seen already, and frankly, looking back at how wind energy and solar energy, the cost reductions happen there, they're happening much more quickly in electric vehicles, and we're getting close, and in the coming years, we will be at cost parity with internal combustion engine vehicles, and then we'll be cheaper than internal combustion engine vehicles. And so if you believe that electric vehicles and electric vehicle technology, not to mention autonomous vehicle technology, are the future, it seems critical to have the United States continue to play a leadership role there. Electric vehicle technology was invented here in the US, and yet today, China manufactures 60% of EVs, and the vast majority of batteries, as well as critical mineral production, is in China. And so we want and need those industries to come back here and to have a strong foundation here. And so we are making those facts and arguments very clear to members of Congress. I'll also say, electric vehicles play roles in our economic stability and national security that are sometimes underappreciated, I think. One, I believe I mentioned, is that electric vehicles are fueled by domestically produced electricity and not foreign oil. But they also, the more EVs we have plugged into the grid and being used, the more reliable and flexible our energy grid is. Because those EVs can be set to charge at times when the grid has excess power. They can be set to actually dispatch power into the grid in the case of an emergency, or in the case of a time when the grid is unstable and needs power from certain sources or certain areas. So there have been many studies on this, that the more EVs that are connected, the more distributed batteries effectively you have connected to the grid, adds to energy resiliency, energy flexibility of our national energy system. And so that's yet another reason that I think people don't think about or appreciate. And then lastly, I just think the impact on businesses is really, that's the biggest case we're making, because we work with businesses every single day that are seeing positive impacts from electric vehicles. And electric vehicles today cannot serve every application, every use case, but when done right, we always tell this to our customers, EVs, when done right, they are a better vehicle for parts of the fleet today, and an ever widening percentage of vehicles, commercial vehicles on the road every year as battery technology improves and costs come down. So those benefits we talked a little bit about, but these are lower operating costs, right? We see 40 to 50% operating cost savings by adopting electric vehicles over their internal combustion engine counterparts. Most of those savings are in the form of lower maintenance and lower fuel costs, but they also have a higher uptime. They're not in the shop. They don't need an oil change. And they all are modern, connected with telematics, allowing both safety improvements. They're smart vehicles, and frankly, better asset management, if you will, utilization management, because you know where that vehicle is at all times, and get a lot of connected vehicle data off of it to optimize. And drivers like these vehicles, when again, drivers surveyed overwhelmingly like electric vehicles. It is a better work environment for people that sit in their vehicle, whether you're a rideshare driver, a long-haul truck driver, a waste management truck driver. If you sit in a vehicle 8-10 hours a day, driving an EV is a much more pleasant, safer, better work environment. And that is consistently revealed through surveys and answers to questions. So, we think this is just a natural evolution of U.S. transportation and commercial vehicles. It's something that's happening at different speeds, in different parts of the industry. But we want to make sure Congress understands these stories, understands the scale of the impact we're talking about, because I think when they see those numbers, and already the conversation we're having when we talk about these numbers and these impacts, I think it raises eyebrows, and people say, well, we don't want, that sounds pretty good. We don't want to stop that. So that's really what we're focused on.
I really appreciate you sharing your insight, because there were a lot of things I didn't know, about like the increase in vehicles plugged into the grid is actually a good thing. It's not a bad thing. And I think that there are a lot of common misconceptions to the basic, the generalized consumer, who in turn is, tied into the business world. But there's a lot of misconceptions about EVs. And I think a lot of it is due in part to the fact that they haven't driven them themselves. I too was reluctant, and I got an EV almost 2 years ago. And in my first year, I did 25,000 miles on my car. Right. And I will tell you, I don't see myself going back to an ICE combustion engine anytime soon, if ever. And that's because, I had to get in and actually experience it for myself, the difference. And I think that the more people who get the opportunity to do so, we will continue to see a change.
That's right.
And going back to, common misconceptions or things that aren't readily discussed, like more vehicles being plugged into the grid, are there any other, bits of gold that you can share to help educate people?
Well, that's a good question. Well, I mean, I think just now speaking, not for the American Fleet Leadership Coalition, but for inspiration, we work with our customers to figure out where EVs are right in their fleet. Again, EVs can't do every job today. They are not right, whether it's because the TCO, the total cost of ownership, doesn't pencil, or it's because the range and payload adjusted range won't satisfy operational requirements. There are many reasons EVs don't work in certain parts of the commercial vehicle landscape. But I think the common misconception is kind of letting the perfect be the enemy of the good, and thinking if they don't work somewhere, they don't work anywhere. And that's something we commonly are working with fleets on, which is to say, look, let us show you the percent of vehicles in your fleet and the number of applications and use cases in your fleet where EVs are undeniably better, right? The charging is easy to set up, the cost is low and knowable, the vehicle saves you money every mile you drive, and it can do the job. Like, it's not going to leave you stranded. It's not, it's not a toy. It's a work vehicle. And I think every time we've done an analysis, which we do for every fleet customer we talk to, we do something we call our EV opportunity assessment, which is a free analysis of all the vehicles in their fleet and the routes they drive and payloads, and to say where are EVs a fit. Every time we've done that analysis, we have identified a much higher percentage of vehicles in the fleet that could and should be electric than the fleet thought going in, right? I mean, I think most fleets start and they're like, well, maybe I can electrify 5% of my fleet. We come out of that analysis often saying, actually, like 50, 60% of your fleet is electrifiable today with today's incentives, today's technology. And each year that goes down the road, those vehicles get cheaper, the batteries get better, the range gets longer, the charging times get faster. So, yeah, we often say, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Like, do the things that are in the money, so to speak, today, where you will be saving money by adopting electric vehicles now, and have a plan for the future. Know what the gating constraint is for every vehicle. Know what is the reason this vehicle is not yet ready for electrification, so that when those things change, whether it's cost or whether it's range, you're ready and able to make that switch. Because we do think, and there's plenty of ample evidence now, that when EVs are done right, they are a better solution for business.
Right. And I think it's a great opportunity for businesses to really question and reconsider, am I purchasing this vehicle because it's a vehicle we've always purchased, or am I purchasing this vehicle because it's the right vehicle for the job?
Exactly. Well, and I would add one more. Am I purchasing this electric vehicle because somebody in sustainability told me I have to? Or am I doing it because actually it's just a better vehicle? My fleet KPIs that I measure all day, every month, I'm going to improve the KPIs that I care about, whether it's cost, reliability, driver satisfaction. I'm going to improve the KPIs with this electric vehicle. And that often surprises people to start thinking that way, that we're not leading with, hey, you're going to reduce emissions. Yes, they are cleaner vehicles, but the operating benefits and the lower costs are why fleets are moving to it, and that's what we stress.
Thank you for that, because I think it's important to hear, and to hear often for businesses as they're considering what vehicles am I going to purchase, this year, next year, anytime ahead.
Yeah.
So I want to pivot back to the coalition. Can you tell me the coalition strategy to ensure long-term support for policies like 45W?
Yeah, well, first, I mean, I will say first that I'm not sure this coalition will continue beyond the next few months, right? The coalition was not originally intended to be a long-term coalition. We are advocating for the preservation of 45W. We've added a lot of members. We have very good interaction. We have a lot of support. I guess it's possible that we see an ongoing mission for this coalition. But once there is a budget bill that is passed, a reconciliation bill that's passed, we're through this process, and hopefully we think 45W is extended and continues. The American Fleet Leadership Coalition may fade into the background. That said, I think the continuing argument for 45W and other electric vehicle and clean technology incentives, the best argument is just continued data on how these vehicles are performing and how they're actually working for businesses. That I think that is where we are at the tip of the iceberg of EV adoption by commercial fleets. The proof points are still few and far between. Sometimes companies don't want to publicize it because they don't want their competitors to know they're actually saving a lot of money, EVs. But the more those vehicles are adopted, the more there are fleets shouting from the rooftops saying, well, electric vehicles worked out great for me in this context, and here's why. And then I think, broad scale support for EVs as a drivetrain, an operating platform, will increase. I also think it's worth saying that 45W and other incentives are not meant to be permanent, right? They are, by their very definition, there's a runway here. They're giving a runway for our domestic manufacturing and our domestic EV industry to take off and thrive and be able to compete on a level playing field with the likes of China and others. And so, I certainly hope that in 5 years' time that there's no need for an incentive, and I'm pretty confident that electric vehicle prices will have reached by that point, at least in most vehicle classes, if not all, will have reached parity with internal combustion engines or be cheaper. So I think we're already on that glide path, and I think this just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy and self-sustaining the more EVs are put to use and the more good experiences fleets have.
Right. And I think a secondary benefit is just the effects on the economy and the job market, moving all of this to our own shores and being able to do it here at home.
Of course. Yeah. That's a huge benefit and frankly, a really important component of future U.S. competitiveness.
Correct. Yeah. So just to close out, for businesses, is there anything upcoming regulatory or compliance that they should be aware of, or how could they stay ahead of this?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, this debate on 45W in particular, and these tax incentives should be settled in a matter of months. I think it's out in the open, very public. So we encourage the commercial fleets and businesses that run fleet vehicles to one, join the coalition if you're interested in being a part of this. Two, just pay attention. I mean, I think incentives for everything, for electric vehicles, for charging, vary widely across the U.S., and it's not just federal incentives. We've been talking about 45W, of course, but there are state regulations, city regulations, there are state incentives, city and utility level incentives. So it is a complex patchwork, especially if you're a national fleet present in multiple jurisdictions. And so I think just making sure that you either develop the internal expertise or count on expert advisors to help track all that and understand the implications of that is going to be increasingly important, because it is very fragmented. But I think most companies that employ large fleets already track regulatory and compliance items, and if anything, I think the federal policy here will be a handful of things. The real complexity and where there's more likely to be more regulation will be at the state level or the local level. And so I think it's, California had its program, which is parts of it are currently on hold. I think it's certainly just worth staying abreast of where fleets operate and what the local and state level regulations and incentives are as everything unfolds.
And for those interested in learning more, where might you lead them to find more resources on EV adoption and the changes within the electrification space?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think many of the fleet conferences and fleet associations now have content and seminars and webinars on electrification. I think there's a lot of education out there. And then, of course, shameless plug, I think speaking to an EFMC like Inspiration Fleet or others in the space, I think that we were set up, as were some others, to help companies with this transition. And so I think having experts that understand fleet and vehicles alongside utilities and energy and infrastructure is pretty critical when you're talking about electrifying work vehicles for businesses. And so there are, we're not alone, the only one in the space, but I think there are specialized resources available. And I would encourage fleets to, seek those out.
Thank you, Josh. I appreciate all of your insight, your expertise on this subject that really affects just about everyone when you consider, what the 45W tax credit truly means. And I am just very grateful for the opportunity to catch your thoughts and educate our viewership on EV adoption and the many changes that are going on currently within it.
Yeah, well, thank you, Ardina. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and your audience. And if there are listeners out there who see this and are interested in participating in the American Fleet Leadership Coalition, we would welcome the opportunity to speak with them.